Our people, I was standing on the overpass on the East Bank last evening, Freddie, and it's unbelievable.
Before I cut you, I just got a thing saying there's no YouTube has this program on YouTube has no audio.
There's no audio. Our apologies. Just bear with us, folks. Thank you too, but are we good again, folks? Okay, thank you. Our apologies. The devil is in the wires again. So we want to use our platform here as responsible citizens to make sure that you appeal to others on the roadways, especially our high car drivers, our minibus drivers. And it's unbelievable what some of those truck drivers are doing on the roadways. It is not safe, it is not good. I was standing on the overpass last evening, Freddie, and that East Bank Road is a death trap. I think our authorities, I would want to say, let's make a concerted effort. Just a runaway train. I saw even on a new road that they opened from Market to Diamond, somebody hit down the barriers. It's a Wild West. That road is going to break up. It's already broken up in some parts. I raised this matter with the Ministry of Housing and Water. I also tried to call the Commissioner of Police today, and I went to the police outpost to complain of the trucks going through because it is going to affect me when those roads are broken up. So we need to do our responsibility. It's not Gildarie's or Freddie's job alone. You have to be the ears and the eyes of the people of Guyana. Let's all do it. Freddie, I'm going to hand the floor right over to you because we want to get into it. Mr. Hamilton Green is in the hot seat tonight.
Thank you. For those 70% of this country's population is under 45, 50% is 18 or just below. Therefore, if you are in that age group and you're looking at this program tonight, you need to pay careful attention to its contents because there are only 4 living Guyanese. Now, if you want to correct me, please send me an email. But my research tells me there are only 4 living Guyanese whose institutional memory of the sociological and political contents of this society is extraordinary. I repeat, the institutional memory is extraordinary. I don't want to put a normative interpretation to that, whether it's positive, negative. Those 4 persons are a UC Guyana, age 98, who has long gone from Guyana, I think the past 15 years. The other 3 are Mr. Ashton Chase, who I believe is, give and take a few years, 99. The other one is Kit Nascimento, Christopher Nascimento, who may be nearing his 90s. Of those 4, Mr. Hamilton Green's historical contours would be more interesting and would be more exhilarating for the fact that of the 4 persons we call, he has held state power longer than any one of them and have been involved in some of the most controversial and exciting situations from the 50s onwards. So if you're young and you're looking at this program, you are going to see a man whose knowledge of what took place in Guyana since the 50s, I advise you to pay attention to what went on in your country. Mr. Green's encyclopedia has some controversial pages. I would think he's one of the most controversial post-1950 personalities this country has produced. He has been a cabinet minister from 1969 until 1992. That takes in about 30 years. He has held the position as vice president, the second in charge of Guyana as a vice president, and he has held the portfolio of prime minister, including 5 different ministerial portfolios. So you could understand what I'm talking about when I say extraordinary institutional memory. With those words, I'd like to remind you, if you're interested, I did an interview with Mr. Green which was published on October the 16th, 2017 in the Kaicho News. You can Google that. So this is my second interview with him. If you're interested in that first interview, please Google it, because Mr. Green said some extraordinary things and some very both disturbing and interesting things. I'm going to start by stating that Gildarie, my co-host, is a baby in comparison to the things Hamilton Green was involved in, the situations, the evolution of Mr. Green. So I think I'll hand over to the baby and then come back to Mr. Green.
Thank you very
I
much.
don't so like the word baby, but I'm not gonna waste time fighting with you today. The people's business have to be done. Mr. Green, straight into 2020 elections. For 5 months, this country would have faced a situation which was probably unheard of in this part of the hemisphere. I want to ask you if you have put thought into it, and what did you think of the fact the now government, the PPP, accused the opposition, the now opposition, of having the SOPs and not giving it out, because that would have been the damning revelations that they lost the elections. What are your thoughts? You were close to some of these folks. What did you find out, and what are your thoughts about the absence of those SOPs?
In 2020, I had withdrawn myself from the active operations of elections for a number of reasons. And second, the whole episode is rather disturbing that we couldn't get results for such a long time. Since some of these matters will engage the courts, I'd prefer to wait and see exactly what information comes out, because there are two sides of every story. And what disturbed me as a listener is that they opened boxes that did not have the requisite bits of information. Now, who is responsible for that is, of course, another matter. The bottom line is it was unacceptable that we should have waited such a long time to have results declared. I have spoken to a person on both sides of the divide, and I have two different stories. Whether the chairman of the Election Commission herself acted impartially is, of course, another matter. I, therefore, will not make a comment because, to repeat myself, I was not involved in the hurly-burly and the details of those elections. My activity in elections ended in 1992. And after then, I was a bystander and not involved in the intimacy of elections, which has its own strange things in Guyana, beginning from 1953.
Freddie.
When it was announced on Guyanese Critic page, Facebook, that you are the guest, I have been receiving, I think the last one I received was at 4:05. I've been receiving emails with questions to you. I can't ask you those questions because some of them are libelous. I don't want to put those discomforting questions to you. I will put some of them, but I will shape them in an academic mode. But I think it's only natural that you expect, when it was advertised that you'll be on any program, people will quickly say, look, ask him about this, ask him about that. In the published interview in the Kaicho News, October 16, 2017, I asked you twice about the long, long journey into power in this country. Hamilton Green's long hold on power. I believe, Gildarie asked me my age, don't worry about that. I'm experienced enough to know that during Mr. Burnham's presidency and Dr. Ptolemy Reed's prime ministership, you were still second in charge. You were the de facto second to Mr. Burnham. So we're talking about lots of exercise of power. And I asked you twice in that interview, in this long journey of shaping Guyana during the PNC and under the aegis of you and Mr. Burnham, if you have any regrets. Twice you said no. What you did as vice president, as prime minister, as one who shaped the PNC government, you have no regrets. 2017, now we're 2022. You want to maintain that position, or you want...
Yes, I have no personal regrets. There were ups and downs. Life is static.
No regrets at all at some wrongdoings?
Well, wrongdoings is always a subjective matter in politics. You see what's happened in the world. We operate in the context of a very damning Cold War. And any political figure, whether you're in the top line or in the bottom line, your first exercise is to survive. Look at what is happening in Ukraine. China, US are now sparring off. In each case, the effort is to survive. That is the culture of the political animal. And therefore, to express regrets, even as you survived or failed to survive, is not the kind of language I would like to use at this time. There were periods in the 60s, 50s, 70s, which presented tremendous challenges to the people of this country. But for the young people, and I'm sure Freddie will understand, it has all to be seen in the context of what existed, what is the world environment. If you go into a fray and people are pelting stones at you, you got to defend yourself. And the Cold War, I think a program like this should spend some time describing to young people, like young Gildarie here, what the Cold War was all about. It ended ostensibly in 1985, and I've spoken to a Russian lady who resides in Antigua, and she made some very unkind statements about Gorbachev. So to answer your question, we had to survive in the context of the Cold War, in the context of a world that was a country that was already being divided along racial lines, unfortunately. And these are emotional things. A man who's Indo-Guyanese, Afro-Guyanese, or mixed, has positions which you take up based on environment. Even though in this country, I find the majority of people of the two major groups are willing and anxious to work together in harmony and peace. But there is this political problem of survival. You see it happening today. It happened between 57, 61. It happened after 92. It happened when we were in office between 69 and 92. Those are the facts. And if there are specific issues that you'd like to talk about, I am prepared to discuss them.
Okay. Perhaps the darkest spot on the close of the PNC, in which you were one of the most active persons at that time, is the Wisma massacre. What happened to Indian people there is a shame in modern civilization vis-a-vis the Caribbean. And I think you should know that that has lodged itself in the prison walls of every Guyanese who is over 70, especially in the diaspora. Don't you think the PNC should publicly apologize to the Indian people of this country for that?
The PNC is a political party there's always attempted to bring the two major races together. What is termed the Wisman massacre must be clearly understood. I've talked to people on both sides of the ethnic divide at Wisbo, Christianburg, Mackenzie at the time. It's a place I had to visit because it was a stronghold of PNC. What happened there was this. The majority of mine workers hailed from West Coast Pabis and East Coast Demerara. And at that time, their kith and kin, so to speak, were being slaughtered. And what triggered this was when one morning they fished out of Zeskendron in the Maikoni Creek, an Afro-Guyanese who had his private parts removed. He was wrapped in barbed wire. And when this news reached to Wismo, there was a reaction which created what we call the Wismo massacre. To repeat, the precursor to that was almost on a daily basis. The folks there received reports of their cousins, their aunties being assaulted, and they assumed by PP or Indo-Guyanese. You had a case at Tain where the Ishmael family, Afro-Guyanese, where the mother was raped and the father plundered and the house destroyed. And there are other instances which I don't care to deal with in detail. But these, to my mind, were the sparks that ignited what is termed the Wisma massacre. But we must not end the discussion there. Remember that consequent to that, the gentleman who was known as Paddy Man and put his bag of paddy in the boat, Son Chapman, owned by an Afro-Guyanese, Yakub Chapman. When the massacre came to an end, the top person at Freedom House said that she, well, you know what I'm talking about now, had a gift for the
He would know who you're talking about.
for the gift of that community.
He would know what you're talking about. Tell him who is she. I don't.
So you had an explosive device placed in some Chapman when Paddy Man put his paddy on board and left, didn't travel.
Are you placing that at the feet of the PPP?
Absolutely. Who else would have wanted to do that? I've discussed this with top PP people. I've heard all sorts of strange explanations. But with a country divided along racial lines, unfortunately, every person on that boat, Son Chapman, was an Afro-Guyanese, everyone. And that started another round of trouble because I went by road the next day to calm the community. And as I arrived there at Christianburg, I'll never forget seeing bodies popping up because the tide had turned. And the worst case was a lady whose husband was once chained. I remember his name just now. She was pregnant. And when her body popped up, the babies just left her womb. I don't like to talk about these things, but that again angered the people at Wisma. I've discussed these things and I said we must learn from our missteps of the past and try to avoid it. Because, as I told my good friend Donald Ramatar in a long conversation we had the other day, that we must stop presenting pictures that on the one side you had a devil and the other side you had angels. To repeat my mantra, when you're surviving, as they say, all is fear and love and war. We were at war. We must stop this thing of believing that Indians were victims and Africans were victims. You know the amount of arms that came in for the PP from Cuba. Because of Burnham's perspicacity, Castro later became a friend of Burnham and the PNC, as you probably know. But they supplied, and they've admitted, I was in Cuba and they admitted, yes, because it's part of the Cold War. As far as they were concerned, they were fighting to support the other side of the Cold War, which was Russian-dominated, the Soviet Union, against what they assumed to be a U.S. grouping. In Guyana, unfortunately, that translated against Afro versus Indo-Guyanese, and that is the tragedy of our country.
But
Freddie,
that sounded a bit one-sided. I know you have to give your version, but I want to say to viewers, that's your version. Okay, Cuba sent arms to the PPP, while the Americans were pouring in arms to the PNC.
I'm not aware of arms coming to the PNC.
But you're aware of arms coming to the PPP?
The evidence is there in the bags that came in. But again, I don't know what arms the PNC had. There's no evidence that we use arms in any conflict.
All that violence in the 60s, a lot of Indian people. I lived I lived in Durban Street, and at the corner of Hardina and Durban, Indian liquor restaurant was bombed. People died. There were so many attacks on Indians, vicious killings of Indians. I mean, you said about body popping up after the Son Chapman explosion and the woman was pregnant. There were women whose belly was slashed and the babies fell out in the Wisma massacre, Mr. Green. I mean, you probably didn't know about that. So you know about the babies popping up from the victims of the Son Chapman. But there were horrible rapes of women in the Wisma massacre.
Well, you know, there's an inquiry, and a lot of what you said is speculation. The inquiry was very detailed because the British conducted it. And as I'm saying again, we must not attempt to damn any one side in this thing. And it would be unfortunate if we present a picture that Indians were the victims alone. That is not the case. Read my book, Paint a Peace, 1953 to 1964. I have in that book catalog details which shows both sides were victims, both sides were aggressors. That book reminded us of PNC activists who were caught doing things that were illegal. PP activists, one man had his hand blown off carrying a bomb in Georgetown. And there's so many things that I can spend next hour talking about, but that is unnecessary at this stage of this discussion.
Thank you, Mr. Green.
I want
You
to press
used
the
word.
point. We must stop this business of portraying one side as being the victims when in that period both sides were victimized.
So the South and the PPP government, 1960 to 1964, with CIA money and PNC collusion, it's not something we should talk about. Your party was involved in an assault and overthrowing an elected government 1960 to 1964, and eventually overthrew it.
But you're talking about the Cold War. You mentioned CIA. I was General Secretary from 62, and I never had any discussions with any CIA operative. I can say that. I can go.
That doesn't mean that the party would not have had.
Well,
Could it not have been Mr. Burnham?
I can only speak for myself.
Right. So you're not speaking on behalf of the party, you speak for yourself.
I can only speak for myself. I'll tell you something about Mr. Burnham, you know. Burnham told us once that he did not get involved in certain issues, because if they caught him and crucified him or tortured him, he would not have much to say. Burnham's technique, if I can use that word, was to identify his lieutenants, give them an assignment. It is no secret that the Americans had interest in ensuring that there was no outpost controlled by the Soviet Union. That is not a secret, that's a fact. And Guyana is only part of a small theater of operation at Vietnam, Korea, in the Caribbean. The two titans, the two giants, struggling and using all of their financial, military, and other resources to keep the others at bay. As far as the Americans were concerned, they could not conceive, and the British, of a Soviet outpost in South America, the only English-speaking country in South America and the Caribbean. For them, it was completely unacceptable.
Mr. Green, back in the 80s, they used the word missteps. Back in the 80s, Burnham made the PNC administration at that time made some decisions. One of them, I think some people would say banning, some people would say restrictions. And I think, from what I read, my little research, it says that it was to push grow it local and consume local. And people like the Indians, the banning of flour, which is integral for the roti, and dal and so on, split peas, was something they could not take. Was that a misstep? You were in Burnham's inner circle. Did you believe, or did Burnham note that this backfired in his face? Was that a conclusion?
Let me say two things. One, this thing about banning flour has always been portrayed as an anti-Indian adventure. Indians are not the only people who use flour. And this thing about roti, black people use roti, Afro-Guyanese use flour. So that is the first propaganda ploy that has been used against Burnham. Yes, a lot of us were concerned that Burnham was an impatient man. I've said so publicly, I'll say so again.
Dangerously impatient. Dangerously impatient.
Well, I would.
You don't want to use that adverb.
I went.
Okay. Go
I
ahead.
went
We'll come to Burnham and Burnham.
I went to school where they taught me to be very careful what adverbs and adjectives you use. Burnham had a vision for this country. He's a great visionary. Nobody can deny him that.
Nobody can deny him that.
He was a visionary.
Untold numbers have denied him that. Anyway, Mr. Green.
That don't
Sorry
say
to
they're right.
continue.
That don't say they're right. Look what's happening in Europe today.
Anyway.
So,
yes.
But therefore he thought it prudent. And flour wasn't banned. Look at the records. We did not have the foreign exchange available. And that was because he was by then getting pressure from both sides. The Americans felt he didn't carry out their wishes for Guyana to become a satellite. They felt that this Afro-Guyanese was too ambitious and that he wanted to make this country too independent. And therefore, a lot of pressure was put on him. Today, had Burnham been alive, we wouldn't be importing papaws, importing plantain chips. And what the present and previous government talked about, food security, would have been a reality by now. In every country, one has to go through a process of sacrifice. I take this view because I grew up at a time where there's no flour in this country, And I survived.
Did you get flour?
None.
None? You didn't use flour?
No, it's not available. I was born in 1934.
Mm-hmm.
The war broke out in September 1939. By 1940, flour didn't come to this country. And I remember how much cassava bread we made.
No, but I asked you the question, Mr. Green. You're in the hot seat. Remember,
Doesn't
was
matter.
Is
it a
your seat
misstep?
hot? He
Was
keeps
it?
telling people in the hot seat.
Yes.
Cool. Very cool.
But you
Yeah,
have
no,
to
no, well, I
stop.
have some questions.
You have to
for
stop
you.
telling people in the hot seat because the man
It's
said
cool?
his seat
No, no,
is
no.
cool.
Mr. Green, did I ask you whether it was a misstep by the Barnum administration to restrict or to ban? You could use those whatever word you want to use.
I repeat, flour, check the records, is never banned. We had a severe shortage of foreign exchange. Remember that by then, when we sold 10 tons of sugar, we were able to buy, I think, 20 gallons of fuel. By then, you had to send 40 tons of sugar to get the same amount of fuel. Absolutely necessary for industry and to keeping the country going. And Burnham's position was, why use flour? Why use wheaten flour? And we taught in India, there are parts in Southeast India where they don't know and don't use wheaten flour. They use rice flour. And Burnham got Professor Trotz and a group together to take our rice, to experiment with it so we can produce a flour that can be used as, I don't even want to use the word substitute, a replacement for
Well, if
wheaten
you take it
flour.
away from the people and you said you can't bring it into the country, people are being arrested for it. Isn't that the same thing as banning?
I don't use the
People
word
viewed it
banning.
as that.
It was a process. And banning is a rather banal term used by the political people in this country for years.
I am.
Freddie.
I think you have. Not I think. I know you have said something here, which I am going to spend the rest of the program boxing you in, because you said it, not me. You said you want. I'm using the word enumeration. You said you have no regrets, but you're willing to consider each item in the 28 years of your rule.
Absolutely.
You're willing to consider episodes, events, etc. So we're going to go the whole gamut. And we're going to start with Walter Rodney. In my interview with you, published October 16, 2017, you said no regrets of denying him a job at the University of Guyana. You were on the Board of Governors, which is now known as the Council. You took the lead in saying, we don't want this man at the university. Surely, with his global credentials, and he being a Guyanese, you have to regret that. I'm asking you now, would you like to offer an apology to his family and to the Guyanese?
No, I don't have anything to apologize for. Let me put it in context. Rodney was a colorful figure. I like Rodney, as a person. I've said so many times. In terms of the world as it was then, Rodney had problems in Jamaica because of his advocacy. In Tanzania, and I can say this publicly, I may have told you, I don't remember.
Yeah, you told me what they told you in Tanzania about
Right,
him.
Nyerere said,
But that's you speaking. We don't have that on the record anyway.
well, I only speak the truth. I grew up in a Christian environment.
What is truth? Remember Pontius Pilate anyway.
Exactly.
That's a friend talking to you, right?
Fred is my friend. I like him. That Rodney had become frustrated and was moving away from academia and seeking a violent route to satisfy his philosophical and political ambitions. And therefore, we did not want to have people with those extreme positions of looking for violence to solve problems. And that is all I can say. When the matter came up to the board, I said, we don't want a controversial figure at the university at a time when the world was in flux. And I said it to you before. It's as simple as that.
No apologies for denying the man a job in his own country.
No, I don't have to apologize for that because it was a decision of the board. I was a part of it. I don't like to use this word apologizing. It's a very difficult
But you
word.
regret that you did that to Rodney as a member of the board. You took the lead
It is unfortunate that he didn't get a chance to serve his country at a level that he would have felt comfortable. But the board itself had a concern that
the board and you.
yes,
Yeah, you were de facto
didn't want to
in
bring
charge.
a person in to disturb the smooth running of the university.
With regards
And
to
this, remember, Rodney didn't come here with a white suit, you know. There was Jamaica and Tanzania. And why did they expel him from Jamaica and Tanzania? Not because of the shape of his face or the color of his skin, because of his activity. So that Guyana followed Jamaica and Tanzania. And we must not take things out of context and the environment extant without examining all the factors. That's a mistake we all make, politicians and newspaper journalists, etc. We have to see things in its context.
You say, just a minute, you say you speak the truth. Let's, thousands of people are
The
watching
truth
you.
is always subjective.
Yeah, okay. The truth is, given our demography, it was impossible for Burnham. You spoke about the Indian-African conflict. In one election, Burnham won 80%. The PNC won 80% of the votes, 1973. It means Indians overwhelmingly loved Burnham. Because if at that time Indian was 53% of the population, and Africans were 43, and Burnham won 80% of the votes, Indians overwhelmingly loved you. I love them. I'm putting it to
What
you.
is the question?
The truth is, Burnham was the PNC in Burnham
question.
were rigging the elections.
Well, you made two quantum leaps. One, that every Indian was anti-Burnham and anti-PNC, and vice versa. What happened during that period is that because of Burnham's popularity, because of his influence,
Burnham's popularity in Guyana among Indians.
I did. You see, I didn't say among Indians. I said popularity.
Okay.
And his influence in the country as such. People came to us. Remember that time we had a very easy proxy system. And I can only speak from my own knowledge. Many Indians quietly came to us because remember that Indians, particularly in certain Indo-dominated communities, were afraid to say anything against the PP as well. Story has two sides, you know. People have come to me, like Rupnarayan from Quarantine, said that he is tormented because he dared to put up PNC flag at his door. Tormented, he, his wife, and children. Those people came to us and said, look, I don't want to go in the polling box. I'll give you a proxy. And I say this, we use the existing regulations of proxy to its optimum. And there again, that is what politicians do. The other side try to do it as well.
Truthfully, Mr. In your articulation, the PNC, Mr. Burnham, did not rig the 1968, 1973, 1978 referendum and 1980 elections. 3 general elections and a national referendum. They were legitimately won by the PNC.
Well, you're introducing two terms that I didn't use, legitimacy and rigging. I told you we use the proxy and other facilities as optimum. That is what we always do in politics. In the United States, in England, all over
And
the
those
world.
proxies gave the PNC 80% of the votes in 1973.
Quite possible.
Gildarie?
Yes, Mr. Green, in 1992, there was international pressure that came down, and Carter Center came into the country to observe the elections. After the PPP came in, it was declared that you guys had left the country in tatters, infrastructure, among other things, and in deep trouble. Was that a regret? What went wrong?
Well, first of all, what is meant by tatters? I read a letter today by some person, something lal, which painted the PNC as terrible, destroying everything. That's not true. And when people talk about tatters, what do they mean by that? It is words.
No foreign exchange, 80% debt.
Well, in that regard, we were not unique. Remember that
The poorest country in this part of the hemisphere.
we get those figures from the poorest country. Poverty is where people have what you call white collar and can't find meals to eat. People found food in this country, by all sorts of means.
Explain the migration, the
And-
flight of thousands of people. Or was you can't say that it's more so for Guyana if you look at the figures that would have been coming up.
I've seen those figures. The flight, first to England and then to the United States, began long before Burnham and Jagan entered the scene. In fact, at the end of World War II in 1945, there was massive migration first to UK and then to the United States. Indo-Guyanese, Afro-Guyanese. You go to Queens now. They didn't migrate between 80 and 92. They've been migrating all the time. There are families in the United States, Indian and Afro-Guyanese families, who they're all second and third generation because they migrated for a long time. As a matter of fact, in my own family circle, there's been migration since the 40s.
So you think it's unfair, the characterization that Guyana was one of the worst country economy-wise in 1992 when the PPP took power?
Well, at least in the Caribbean.
That is unfair.
That was an unfair characterization.
If you examine the rest of the world, if you had that condition, there'd be riots in this country. If that is so, there'd be mass riots.
Well, they
in this
could.
country.
The people could have been dormant. Cuba's been
But look-
mistreating its people since 1959, and they haven't been mass riots. Maybe
Well-
people in the country just don't. But I want to move on.
No, but
to,
Freddie, before you move, you know what you just said disturbs me. For this reason, here we are seeing the world and countries through the prisms of the West.
I certainly do. I see the world through my prism.
I've been to Cuba several times. And the average Cuban, at least when I was there, loved Fidel Castro. I'll give you a few examples. But recently you talked about riots. What do you think happened in Sri Lanka recently?
Economy.
Huh? Exactly. And the president couldn't even get out safely. Right now in Europe, Afghanistan, other
My
places.
question to you, Mr. Hamilton Green, was 1992, if that was a fair characterization, but you come in 20 years ahead. I'm not sure how were the two?
It was based on beliefs by some set of people that things were that bad. There were challenges, but that kind of language is certainly not acceptable.
What kind of language?
This
That
is the
it was-
worst country in the Caribbean. Or the world.
At
He
the
said the world at the time.
Well, I corrected him in the Caribbean, but all the IDB and CARICOM statistics showed from 1980 onwards that outside of Haiti, we had the lowest GDP, and related areas. But I want the young people who are looking at this program, I want to keep zeroing in and Burnham. I certainly do not think this program or any historical discussion on Guyana should not touch in complex ways and scholarly ways on Mr. Burnham's failure. Now, I listened to Gildarie's question, I listened to your answer. I think it was impertinent, highly reprehensible for Mr. Burnham to tell this nation and this world in 1974 that his private organization named the People's National Congress must now be emblazoned in the political and sociological reality of Guyana as being paramount to the state. Now, surely you must, Mr. Green, as you move on in age and you reflect, that had to be a mistake.
Well, again, the language he used is inappropriate. Burnham never said the party was paramount to the state. We talk about the paramountcy of the party in terms of getting a program to feed, clothe, and house the nation, and an ambitious program for free education so that we take our people out of the doldrums which they found themselves after independence and before independence. And therefore, that language, again, is not truly appropriate.
Now, I will give you description of the paramountcy of the party because I was a student at UG, and I'm directing you to the autobiography of Isu Prasad. The paramountcy
Which
of the
Prasad?
Isu Prasad, his autobiography, there's a reference to each state corporation had a party functionary that was unrelated to the corporate structure. He was in the corporate structure as a party assignee. The paramountcy of the party was manifested in a ministry named the Ministry of National Development. That ministry and the PNC merged, and in each state institution, there was a section of that ministry in state organizations. There was one at UG, and there were party apparatchiks in public corporations. Mr. Isu Prasad said this man was a nuisance, and he
Which
was
man?
the party guy and he complained to Mr. Burnham, and Mr. Burnham did not remove him, but Mr. Burnham gave Isu Prasad satisfaction. You had the PNC flag flying over the Court of Appeal. I say to you again, before the program is over, don't you want to reflect on some of these mistakes and offer some regrets?
Well, this question you just talked about, I'm unaware of it. That's all I can say. I'm unaware of what you're talking about, of having people in each ministry, each agency. I haven't seen Yesu Prasad. Is this Yesu Prasad from DDL?
Yeah, his biography talks
read
about
that.
the party intrusion in the running of state corporations.
Well, you know, he interviewed me on one of his programs. He never drew that to my attention. And I got up pretty well with
That
him.
doesn't mean it doesn't exist. We are drawing it to your
Well,
attention.
I am unaware of this. That's all I can say. I can't comment on that. I'm not aware of having to identify anybody as a commissaire or whatever it is in any ministry. National development was intended to promote a consciousness for the people to understand what
Do you believe
independence really is.
the WPA burned down the Ministry of National Development? Do you believe that, or that was a setup against the WPA?
I know,
That they burned down the...
yes. You want to tell us a part of the story?
Yes, please.
A young man named Osborne met me at the corner of what is now Homestretch Avenue. Stopped my car, Anne's Grove. I'm prepared to swear this information. I said, come, I want to see you. He called me Uncle Hammy. Stopped the car, talked to him. He said, look, his brother is a WP activist, and he overheard him talking about burning down national development. I put him in my car, took him straight to Burnham, who was at the residence at the time. He repeated that story. called, in my presence, James Mentor, who was then
Chief of Intelligence. Yes, he was Chief of Intelligence.
well, we knew him as head of special branch.
Right, with special branch.
We
duties.
use a British terminology. Gave him information and told him to set a trap for the chaps. So while the fire was burning, James Mentor, to avoid the wrath of Burnham, left this country and never returned. I think he died about 2 years ago. I repeat the story to his own family and friends. It's the gospel truth. Now, whether Mentor was a WPA activist, I don't know. All I can say, he got the information and did nothing. About James Mentor, people's personality come out in these when you have high office. Mentor was a bright young police officer. And I believe he objected to anyone producing information security-wise that did not come from one of his sources. Every state has sources to collect information. Americans, the British, the Russians, they use women, they use... Right now you go around certain embassy, see people selling ice cream and they're really being paid to collect information. That is the nature of the world. And he believed, I believe, that any information coming from a source outside of his network could not be credible, and therefore did not act on that information. I was present. I can tell you for a fact, the young man ended up being who brought the information to me, ended up being a driver for Dr. Reed. I don't know where he is now. But I repeat, while the fire was burning, Mentor got the plane and never returned to this country.
Interesting. I hope that was GAC. As we come down,
No,
we wind-
because and that plan we knew was by activists of the WPA.
This program is being hosted by Guyanese Critic Platform. I think you know who's
It
Guyanese
doesn't
Critic.
matter.
And he asked
Who's
me,
Guyanese critic?
Guyanese Critic is the person who owns the company and in which we're doing this program. And he did ask me to ask you, and everybody who's looking would want to know about the Vincent Tika murder. I did tell Guyanese Critic that it was raised in my interview, published interview, October 16, 2017. And I think in fairness to him, I forgot as we were going and time is going. You want to give us your take on that? Most people felt he was
I
killed
know
by state.
nothing of Vincent Tika's passing. Absolutely nothing. And I've offered to take a polygraph test on this. Absolutely nothing I know about it.
Well,
But let me say something, Freddie.
Yeah.
You know, when you're popular and people think you're awesome, so to speak, anything they like to pin on, many things have been ascribed to me that I know nothing of.
All right.
Well,
as we wind down,
we gotta go
ladies
now.
and gentlemen, as we wind down, I just have one more question for Mr. Green. He's been very gracious, and I must remind you, he's 88 years old, and his memory is sharp, and he has a way with words. So, did you, while you were probably the second most powerful man in Burnham's administration, know of any situation where the administration directed any murders or any hits on anybody, or to hurt anybody, or to disappear with them, or anything that you believe or
Or
could
to
be
victimize
construed
them?
as criminal?
Absolutely none. In fact, I'll tell you a story. I got word that some young men wanted to get at Clive Thomas. I don't know who they were. I sought them out and said, we have no interest in that kind of activity. I told this to Clive Thomas once, who I spoke to a couple of years ago. So, speaking of myself, we had no interest in want to hit anybody. That would not have helped us because there was no need for that. Absolutely no need. I can't speak for Burnham, I can speak for myself.
But if you can't speak for Burnham, but come on, Mr. Green, we're into the area of methodology, logical deduction. We're into scholarly research matters here. If you cannot speak for Burnham, then are you willing to exonerate him in murder, in people being brutalized? You willing to if you were not involved, you Hamilton Green were not involved in Rodney's murder, why would you want to exonerate people who were involved in his murder? You were not involved. So why exonerate Burnham?
Let me say two things. I can neither condemn nor exonerate. And
So Burnham may have been involved.
I doubt it very much. Let me say something about the Rodney thing. Yeah? And since you've raised this question again with me, I like Rodney as a person, as an academic. I have not seen any evidence that links Burnham or anyone at the PNC to Rodney's past. In fact, at the last inquiry, his sister, presented his book, which he did when he was in French Guyana. It's quite clear. He says that the device that Rodney had, it was an accident. Two things about that, Freddie, since we're speaking frankly. Why would a man who has a party that is hoping to take over government, that's what parties are about, go on this journey, not with any of the known activists, Rupert, his brother? When you are in politics and you are crunch time, you rely on the loyalty of your kith and kin and your blood.
Okay.
Well, no, let me finish. You can't cut me.
No.
You asked a question.
All right, okay. But
these things require elucidation. And why should an academic, according to WPA, have what has been described as a walkie-talkie to test against the prison walls? A walkie-talkie going to any Brahms Mart or Radio Shack and buy it. So I have not condemned Rodney or anybody, except these questions have never been answered, except people, again, are pointing fingers at
No,
Burnham.
but you have answers, but time has caught up on us. Mr. Jerry Gavaya at the Commission of Inquiry said as an army captain, he was ordered to fly out a certain man. He didn't know who the man was, etc. But the army flew out a guy. It turned out Jerry Gavaya was flying out Gregory Smith. Now, if Walter did this and did this and did that, why was the GDF flying out that guy, Mr. Greenarm?
I was present.
We gotta go.
No, hold on.
Oh, yeah,
No, you can't make those.
Yeah, after your answer.
It's unfair for you to make
after
those.
your answer, sure.
I was present when Gavaya gave that evidence. A, he couldn't know who Gregory Smith was. And B, there was no evidence linking Burnham to flying out anybody on any aircraft. And the whole thing is speculation because people who were there as part of the team began the exercise by blaming Burnham without presenting the evidence. The only credible evidence was what Gregory Smith himself wrote. He said it was an accident.
So he killed a man, and you expect him to say I killed a man. Okay, before you go, is there anything else? I don't want to cut you, but time has caught up with us. So
No,
I
just want to say it's unfortunate that in history we develop themes and beliefs without any credible evidence. Guyana's famous for that kind of thing. Because Burnham was such an awesome personality, a powerful man. He has been blamed for all sorts of things. The Rodney case and all sorts of things. And therefore, I would suggest to young people listening to be careful and do your own research and don't come to conclusions based on the beliefs and mysteries of other people.
Mr. Green, we got to go now. The time is.
Thank you very much. And ladies and gentlemen, we want to say thank you very much to our guest today, former Prime Minister of Guyana and also former Mayor of Georgetown, Mr. Hamilton Green. He has come under some serious questioning. I won't use the word grilling, and he has come out and give his answers, and that's a beautiful thing about it. Next week it's going to be a very packed week for us. We have on Monday talking about the state of education, Minister of Education, Priya Manikchand. On Wednesday, and Freddie, we have Dr. David Hines of the WPA. Freddie, I know that you would have expressed your opinions and given your statements regards and would have.
But we will have a
Right.
discussion.
So
I hope to keep
hope
it.
that you're going to be
Yeah, yeah.
gracious.
Yeah,
to
yeah.
Mr.
We'll keep it
Hines.
scholarly, and we'll keep it political. And on that's David Hines on Wednesday. On Friday is
Mr.
opposition Ganesh
Right.
Paul.
So this way you're gonna all have it, and I know that it's gonna be fiery with David Hines, regardless what Freddie says, because that's who Freddie is. Out there, it's a weekend, and I hope that you guys take care on the roadways. It is gonna be, I think it is gonna have some rains this weekend, so drive safely on the road and stay safe until we meet you again next week. Have a pleasant rest of the evening.